Good morning. This is a public meeting of the Indiana Arts Commission, Arts Organization Support Level 3 Grant Program for fiscal years 2021. Advisory review. And I'm Nancy Stewart, Commissioner from Fort Wayne. Today is Thursday, April 25th, 2019, and we are in Conference Room 2 of the Government Center South in Indianapolis. And we anticipate that we will have some visitors, so we look forward to that, hopefully. As in all events of this type, we would encourage you to please silence your cell phones. And we will take a few minutes here now for everyone, for the staff and the panelists to introduce themselves. And why don't we begin with you, Jeff?
Sure thing. I'm Jeff Garrett with the State of Michigan Council for Arts and Cultural Affairs. I'm a program manager for the Operations Support.
Ruby Lopez Harper, Director of Local Art Services, Americans for the Arts, based in Washington, D.C.
Karen Gall-Mills. I'm a lecturer at the University of Chicago and on the Arts Administration faculty at Indiana University Bloomington. I live in Chicago.
Chapin Schnick, IAC staff. Paige Sharp, IAC staff.
Nancy Stewart, Indiana Arts Commissioner from Fort Wayne.
Deanna Postma, IAC staff.
Jane Hunter, retired Symphony Orchestra Executive Director in South Bend. Susan Visser, Executive Director of the South Bend Museum of Art, and I live in South Bend.
Tyrone Spann, Program Director for Gary Alumni Pathway for Students, and I live in Hammond, Indiana.
Thank you all very much. We're delighted to have you here. Just a little bit about the process. I will announce the grant applicant. I will call on the first reader. Once again, we know that you've all read them, so we encourage you to just share with us the strengths and opportunities. We will call then on the second reader, and I was going to look up all the different synonyms for new. So we will ask you to something new, something different, an opposing point of view. And then we will ask you to update your scores. And if there aren't any questions, we will get ready to go, and we will begin with the Fort Wayne Museum of Art. And our first reader this morning is Karen.
Right, thank you, good morning. So the Fort Wayne Museum of Art, working straight from the grant review criteria. Very clear alignment here between their mission and their activities, and I was pleased to see the language about seeking to demystify the visual arts in all of their statements in the application. They appear to be a regional hub of activity in northeastern Indiana. They are a key part of a new arts campus in downtown Fort Wayne, and their executive leadership is involved in a lot of civic activities, which is great to see. They seem both artistically engaged and civically engaged. I think that bodes well for this organization. Pleased to see that they are members of the Alliance of American Museums. I can't remember what AAM stands for now because they recently changed their name, but I think that's an important metric and an important signal of the kind of work that they're doing. Their strategic plan is solid, and it sets out being vital and welcoming as a goal, which is laudable, and I think we saw that throughout this application. I appreciate that they're benchmarking against other museums of a similar size and really trying to make changes and adjustments based on that. Their strategic plan is very operational, particularly around their financial metrics. I would be curious to know what the strategic conversation was within the board and the staff about what they would or would not do to try to achieve their goals. Kudos to this applicant for listing their demographic information about their trustees. It's nice to know that they have set a target of engaging younger trustees, and there's evidence in the board list that they have new blood on the board, and they're talking very specifically about how that's working. It's very helpful to see the detail. They are financially healthy and stable, running a surplus in fiscal 18 and have budgeted for a surplus in fiscal 19 with a strong cash position, some endowment funds for additional strength. They had, I thought, saw evidence of a clear commitment to two-way engagement in their application. It was great to hear about initiatives that involve all segments of their community and their surrounding communities, with notes about differences between urban and rural audiences. And I appreciate the focus on immigrants through learning with the Language Services Network, which led them to offer bilingual tours in Spanish and Burmese that feels authentic and a two-way partnership, which continues to grow. Great to see their free nights, admission for all, especially those with EBT cards. Always good to think about ways to reduce financial barriers to participation. Their exhibits also travel, so the museum happens outside of its own walls, speaking to that two-way piece particularly. And it was great to see the specificity in their answer about who they are targeting for increased participation and why. They're specifically saying young families and folks with low or no vision, which they explain very clearly, which might seem unusual for a visual art museum. So I was grateful to see that as well. For the arts education criteria, their descriptions of programs were very clear and talked about how interconnected they are with their overall exhibits. So they're not simply doing education programs that are different than their main programming. It's same programming for different audiences. Very clear descriptions of who will benefit and how populations will be redirected to underwrite admission for school students. I appreciated the clarity on the credentials of those who are creating programs. And as to artistic quality, I thought that the video that they provided really demonstrated the quality of the artists and the items featured in the collection, though the video was much more traditional than I anticipated after reading the application, an application that describes so many vibrant partnerships with the community. And I'd encourage the applicant to consider not just how you bring the audience, rather the artist, but how you bring the audience into your support materials for the future. You talk about vibrant partnerships. I did not see them in evidence in the video materials, and that felt like a miss to me. The marketing materials were solid. The web and Facebook presence was fun and engaging, and more so than the video, certainly. All in all, this is a solid museum doing great work for this part of the year.
Thank you, Karen. Susan, do you have anything to add to that?
I do have a couple of things to add, and just a couple of things for emphasis. I agree with the benchmarking, and I thought that it was a particularly innovative way to use benchmarking as a way to bring programming and financing for that programming up to where they believe it should be for institutions their size and their function. I also wanted to emphasize regarding the Scholastic Art Awards, let me just find it here, that I thought their program, which they called the Hope Gap, was also particularly valuable. That's the program through which they visit inner city schools to facilitate a video conversation between former Scholastic Art Awards winners and students seeking to enter the competition, which really fosters the confidence for these other students to enter. Regarding artistic quality, I agree about the video. I did think I went to the website to develop a greater understanding for some of the visual quality of the material that they were showing and producing, and I was surprised to see that there were so few images on the website. I think it would be very helpful, especially as regards exhibitions, to have more images that give a better understanding of what the exhibitions are. But I do think overall the museum has great community penetration and dialogue, and other than that, I agree.
Thank you, Susan. Does anybody else have anything new to add to this?
I would like to, this is Ruby, I would like to make just a notation on the strategic plan. They do call out that they haven't changed their goals in the last 10 years, but I think while that sounds interesting, they may want to reconsider lauding that as like something they're proud of, and may want to take a moment to reassess given the changes in demography that we know is coming, given new commitments to diversity, equity, and inclusion that we know are important in how organizations continue to be relevant and sustainable. They may want to reflect on how that manifests in their strategic plan as they are considering changes and as they consider their year over year. Because while I do agree they gave some great statistics around their board representation, I didn't see what was driving that desire within their strategic plan. And so that alignment is really important. And I also would encourage them to reflect on how their aspirations for representation align against what their community looks like. Because sometimes it's great to have those goals of representation, but it may not always align with what your community looks like. And so to have that extra piece in the conversation really gives context and intentionality and strengthens that narrative in a significant way.
Anyone else? All right, if we would update our scores, please. Still working on it? Is everybody updated? Great. Okay, we will move on then to Arts for Learning, the Indiana affiliate of Young Audiences. And Jeff is our first reader.
Thank you. Okay, so Arts for Learning, the Indiana affiliate of Young Audiences, empowering children to achieve creative and intellectual potential through arts education. They are part of a national network and dedicated to providing unique and engaging learning opportunities through the arts. Going through the application, just a few things to note. Been continuous for over 50 years. In the third year of a strategic plan, they use the plan to drive decisions to develop key initiatives. And the board is working on diversity and inclusion, not only through the board, but also throughout the organization. I noticed some decrease in school funded programs, but still found the financials favorable. Going through, when reading the community engagement, did start off by specifically identifying a group or target audience other than children, regardless, and then later refers to programming in rural areas, which of course will be outside of the org's home region. And they're striving to increase their reach throughout the entire state of Indiana. They seek their input by assessing the needs of families as well as requesting feedback. Arts and education. They recruit, vet, and train teaching artists as well as provide professional development for their staff and others in the field. All the staff seems to be highly qualified, if not better. And to wrap up with the artistic quality, I appreciated the promo material scorecard just because I'm a fan of visuals, so it was great. Info right up front. Video was good. Narrative and application packet to me demonstrate to a meaningful and impactful experience to those it serves as well as its staff and also teachers I work with. And it appears to me to be dedicated to the arts education, arts integration, as well as a new perspective on teaching and learning.
Thank you, Jeff. Ruby, something new to add to that?
Yeah, so for organizational excellence, I really would have liked a little more information about their commitment to the DEI work. Just the makeup of the board at this time, what their goals are related to aspirational makeup that they hope to achieve. I did appreciate the financial detail and the explanations they provided, but I was unclear about one component that they note about a $300,000 foundation support that was supposed to be reflected in the financials, but I looked them over, couldn't figure it out. So I think because of that kind of not clear, just suggest to the organization, they always proofread their application. Sometimes in the drafting, you pull content that may not be relevant, that may not be appropriate, that may not be current. So just take a moment to make sure that your application is current and up to date and all the things that it needs to be. I also wanted to say that I'm not sure citing kind of dated recognition makes for a compelling component for the application when you're talking about your arts and culture community leadership. And so maybe reflect on the current activities that you're working on and bring those to light. Sometimes it isn't about being cited or having an award. Sometimes it's about being a convener and bringing together conversation that hasn't happened before. And so what other ways are you manifesting your leadership role in your community? I also wanted to note the Sunshine Program I thought was a really interesting example of thoughtful outreach, but I really would have liked more information about how they plan to get input from individuals benefiting from the program. Are they deploying surveys, interviews, focus groups? Just a little more detail would have just made that a little even more compelling than it already was. For arts education, it appears that I think the narrative might have been a little incomplete, so make sure that you're always proofreading your application to ensure completeness. There was like a sentence that just kind of trailed off and didn't go anywhere. And so that note for that, clear that you guys have a rigorous vetting process and clearly committed to the learning and development of your teaching artists, which is amazing and great and something to be celebrated because not every organization makes that commitment for professional development. For artistic quality, I saw on their Facebook page, they have yoga programming and workshop offerings. And so like, it's always, I think, a surprise element when, as a panelist, you happen upon something that's really interesting and compelling, but then the organization makes no note of it in their application. And so just, if you're doing these other things, how are those other things fitting within the umbrella of the work that you're doing? And how do you bring those in to tell a more robust story about how you are activating and serving your community? And the materials, while simple, tell a compelling story. They're accessible to social media platforms. We're really engaging. And one small note, the imagery that they use across their digital platforms is telling a really interesting story, but I struggle to understand the density of diverse populations being served by the organization and how that's playing out in the images of participants that they use. They state 74% of Marion County participants receive partial or fully funded programming. So how does that compare to the demography of Marion County? And having done some Googling, I'm still not sure. So just make sure that when your organization is approaching its personality, its brand, its visual representations, that there's a through line in all of the stories that you're telling.
Thank you, Ruby. Anybody have anything different to add, new?
I'll make one additional comment. I echo the comments about the good description of programs and how teaching artists are chosen and what that stuff works. To Ruby's point about the racial question, I'm curious about what weight is racial diversity given when they're choosing teaching artists, when they're specifically talking about trying to serve other populations. That felt like an omission in otherwise a very complete description of how they choose teaching artists and why. So if you are trying to choose to match a population, just be more explicit with that. That will help us help you.
Ready to finalize our scores? Finalize, update. Okay, we're ready to move on to our third application, Butler University Clowes Memorial Hall. Is that how you say it? Clowes. Clowes. Thank you.
Clowes. All right.
I said
Clowes. Good. Lots of it. I didn't have it right at all. Clowes. So going straight to the application review criteria. So Clowes has a clear history of presenting multidisciplinary work. While it is unclear of the organization's recognition, it is clear that they are bringing well-known artists and offering opportunities to individuals around Indianapolis. I appreciated the reference to the airport art exhibition and the opportunities through the Scholastic Art and Writing Awards. I found the narrative a little vague in how they appear to have no influence in board member selection. I would suggest being more versed in how the university is choosing board members and finding ways to perhaps inform or guide selections. I felt like there was something missing there. It would have been helpful to talk about their placement on the agenda of their larger group. Trying to get a sense of how they factor into the discussions or considerations of the board would be helpful. I appreciate that they recognize the critical nature of updating the strategic plan with the new leader in place. It is clear they have achieved several goals set out in their previous strategic plan and continue on their way to finalizing. I would suggest including outcomes in their next plan and perhaps who is responsible for leading those efforts. I would have liked more information about the financials to understand some of the differences from 2018 actual to 2019 budget to end of year projections, which are in some lines all over the place. Having detail to better understand the movements would have been helpful. I would have liked to have seen more explanation in the narrative to get a better sense of what drives their decision making around budget projections, especially when they seem to be rather disparate. For community engagement, it is clear that it operates outside its institutional walls to impact underserved communities and others through programmatic activities. The main evidence of working outside their institutional walls is the Kennedy Center partnership. I really wanted the rest of the storyline. For example, the applicant states that they do these things because, the applicant states that they do these things but don't touch on the why. Why does this make sense with targeted partners? Why does this advance the mission of Clowes? How does this work enrich the larger community? On a side note, I also want to call out that they may want to consider using a word other than expose. In the current vocabulary of equity, this is indicative of a one-sided mindset, perhaps reflect on words like engage, activate, or opportunities to interact. The Clowes has identified a rather broad target audience, and sadly, the advisory group doesn't reflect, or it is difficult to discern how it reflects the targeted audience. They say they want to activate families, specifically large families, but don't seem to have thought about how to invite them into this conversation. There should be a clear through line from the desired target group to their inclusion in the discussion, and I felt this part of the narrative missed the mark in telling a compelling and full story. The applicant may want to consider the two audiences they list as distinct and separate and reflect on two advisory groups they intentionally activate their voices. For example, ask the partner schools if they have large families in their community. What defines a large family? Are there other partners in the city that are doing this work effectively? Who are they in dialogue with? I also failed to see how they ensure the community has fair access and inclusion to their programming. In terms of how this organization plans to increase access or break down barriers, I felt I got almost nothing out of this narrative except continued highlights of their existing programming. The narrative did not discuss any of the elements of increasing IDEA, except to say they want to expand audiences who have not considered attending their performances before. I really encourage this organization to reflect on their idea of work and understand for themselves what this work means to their organization and their community. I felt like they simply aren't digging deep enough or clearly understanding how this work is distinctly different from standard audience development work. The organization rarely says who they are trying to reach beyond large, broad descriptors. It is unclear how their strategy to get input from those that benefit will work. Similar to the rest of this assessment for community engagement, the organization just needs to think through this more. For arts education, the applicant clearly understands the breadth of their arts education programming, but I would have liked more depth. I did find it strong that they offer assistant services, but there's no information about how often those services are utilized or how they align to the groups that are coming to their spaces or how they fit into the programming being offered. Again, as before, the narrative lacks context and detail. I would have liked more information throughout about the impact of the work being provided to the community. The trainings are great, but to what extent are they changing behavior or driving knowledge building towards a specific goal that improves conditions for the whole community? For artistic quality, the quality of the artistic presentations is clear and broadly appealing. Given the caliber of the performances they are able to offer, I would have liked to have seen some examples about the school programs they offer or the art shows. That was missing, and I wanted to see examples of the students they are working with, teachers that have gone through the training. I would have given a higher consideration, but I felt that they really relied on the polished professionalism of the groups they are offering to demonstrate the quality of their programming, but they also need to embrace the community work they are doing and show that it matters to them. It would not have taken away from the quality, and I feel would have enhanced the story they're trying to tell. I feel that when presented with a grant program that so clearly is asking organizations to be thoughtful, this was a miss to not speak to that and bring that forward in the samples of work. It feels like you're hiding them. The social media presence was engaging. I just want to call out that I really liked the spam Instagram work that was going on, and it's clear that they understand how to use each platform.
Thank you, Ruby. Tyrone, do you have anything to add to that?
Not much, but I would like to add in there that it would have been nice to have them talk a little bit more about what the new leadership direction may be thinking, or if they're going to be doing any types of different directions, because looking at it, their strategic plan is up for this year. And because they have the new leadership coming in, just curious, because they're under the auspices of a university, they're not their own standalone entity, if there's understanding that they're going to continue moving on in the same direction, just trying to build on the work that they've been doing before, or because of this new leadership that they're considering going in a different direction. Because it's in there and it's not there, that was just a question that I had in regards to that, because of the unique structure that we do have.
Thank you. Does anyone else have anything they'd like to add?
I also noted that, or had that question about how they were going to approach the planning measures with new leadership, and also would have liked them to consider putting in leading and lagging measures of success in the strategies. I like to go to numbers, and I noted that they had listed 475 part-time employees, which was a lot, and that was a major compensation per se was a major portion of their budget, so it would have been helpful to have a detail of who they were and what they were doing. Were they university people? Were they directed exclusively to Clowes? Or so that was a question.
Anybody else? Okay, then let's update the scores, please.
What's going on? We're moving tables around and they're just in the course, and there's construction happening downstairs now. It's downstairs? It's downstairs. Are they gonna be done soon? Brian, but where are we done?
which I think if we all speak up, we can go. I thought, oh my gosh. All right, we're ready to move on to application number 4, the Eiteljorg Museum of American Indians and Western Art. Susan's our first reader.
Okay, they have a clear mission focused on the art, history, and cultures of the American West and indigenous peoples of North America. And I think all of the programs they do are well within their mission. They do a very, very wide range of programs, very diverse, range from contemporary Native American blankets, textiles, jewelry, glass, to Hopi carvings, in terms of leadership, they are accredited by the American Alliance of Museum and were the first alliance partner of the Smithsonian National Museum of the American Indian, which I think is very distinguished, both of those qualifications. And I think it serves a unique niche. It is the only museum of its kind east of the Mississippi. So it's doing a great service to this particular region of the country. And they also are collaborating very strongly with the regional indigenous tribes and the Smithsonian to maximize the value of the scholarship. Finances are very sound. They're looking at a surplus of about $162,000 in 2019 versus a deficit of $61,000 in 2018. They specifically mentioned community engagement with especially the Native American community, but they're also reaching out to Black, Latino, and LGBTQ communities. I thought that they specifically mentioned some LGBTQ initiatives, but I didn't see a lot of specificity about the work they're doing with the Black and Latino communities. I think one of the really valuable things that has happened with the museum is the new focus on the Great Lakes area. They received a very significant gift of 19th and 20th century artifacts from the Great Lakes area. And I think that will have a significant impact on the scholarship and the learning in that particular area of Native culture. And they're also collaborating with regional indigenous tribes and the Smithsonian around that particular area, which I think will have great value going forward. New partnerships with the Indiana School for the Blind and Visually Impaired and Art Mix are making great strides toward outreach to people with disabilities. Also working with Alzheimer's dementia caregivers to develop sensory friendly experiences. I thought their artist in residence program was very strong, and their efforts to develop real relationships with the real residents of the near West Side neighborhood, which is their closest neighborhood, and try to bridge that river that runs between the museum and the neighborhood. In terms of artistic quality, I thought the application was very articulate and well written, as was the strategic plan. The program served the mission well, reflecting the emphasis on art, but also on history and culture of the American West and indigenous people of North America. I think they clearly strive for the best. The quality is very high. The programming reflects creative thinking, a strong effort to increase knowledge and scholarship, and a desire to provide access to the highest examples of fine art and craft within the scope of their mission.
Thank you, Susan. Second reader, Karen,
Yeah,
anything new to add?
I had a slightly different take on this one. On the organizational excellence question, while I agree that they have planned for success in fiscal 19, I noted that they missed their revenue targets by $1 million in fiscal 18, and that concerns me. They talk a lot about how they're trying to change and the things they're trying to do differently. And when you miss your revenue target by $1 million, that makes me wonder if you have all the pieces in place to actually make that change a reality. So I just call that out as something that is a concern, and I would have liked to have seen that addressed better in the narrative. I also would have liked to have seen comments in the narrative about their current board demographics, just tell us who's currently serving. And given the two-way relationship with Native peoples that they talk a lot about in their engagement and education sections, I'm curious if there are Native voices in leadership on in this museum's organization, and if not, why not, and what their plans are for getting there. So I would encourage them to consider adding that kind of information and that detail to help us build a better picture. Throughout the application, I felt that the evidence of two-way engagement was mixed. There were some places where I thought it was very, very strong, and there were other places where it felt like they were bringing programs to the community as opposed to crafting programs with the community. So again, make sure you're reading the entire application and looking at a through line. If you truly value two-way engagement, make sure you say it everywhere so that we see that it is not something that is relegated just to your arts education kind of work. Also, I was looking for more specifics on target audiences. There's a question that asks you, who are you trying to increase participation from and why? I was looking for a more clear answer on that. And then finally, in the last bit about the materials, the video Native Art Now I thought was very, very solid. But I do want you to consider, one of the very first voices we hear was somebody who appeared to be white, I shall say, talking about how art can be scary and horrifying. And starting to hear the words scary and horrifying at the beginning of the video, trying to get you engaged in what's going on at the museum, just think for a minute about the message that is sending, particularly to the audience that you're trying to reach. In print materials and on the website, I also noted that the material is pretty dry, and I was going to ask, how do you think a new visitor sees himself or herself in the materials that you're using to talk about the museum? I think it's a place that is clearly working hard to lift up Native populations of the Great Lakes, which is really important, and my comments are meant to be constructive and encouraging you to increase what you're doing and improve your engagement.
Anybody have some additional new comments, opposing points of view?
I do just want to call out that it was very refreshing to see the applicant share data about usage of their access program participants, because you don't see that very often. And so I just want to shout that out, because I think that's really an important component for an organization to understand, not just where they're throwing free things, but if it's actually activating the audiences that they're trying to serve and engage with.
Thank you. All right, then let's update our scores, please. Moving on to number 5, the Evansville Museum of Arts, History, and Science, Tyrone.
Yes, the museum has demonstrated a strong history of solid programmatic and administrative leadership. While there's a recent change in leadership, it appears the overall leadership team has taken this as an opportunity to reassess the direction the museum should go and what opportunities are there, which I was encouraged about. It doesn't give me a large concern in regards to what is going to happen in the future, but I couldn't completely judge the overall direction of the organization because it didn't specifically mention what things are going to do moving forward. But this does appear to be an opportunity for the organization to reassess itself and possibly look for other strengths and weaknesses that's there. In regards to the arts and cultural leader, they're in a unique situation because they are covering different states. So it appears that they are embracing that opportunity as far as being the larger metropolitan, being the largest metropolitan area in that particular region. One thing that I did not see is that their talk about whether or not they had different strategies in regards to getting engaged with the different states, because even though it's a region, there are different populations in different areas that's there. So he didn't discuss if they had to engage in different strategies working in Indiana versus Illinois versus Kentucky. because there are different jurisdictions there. So it would have been, I would have liked to have seen a little bit more discussion about they have to do that or they can just do a blanket strategy. And that kind of flows into this community engagement as well too, because even though it's one region, there are different demographics that's there. They didn't, in my opinion, go into enough detail in regards to how they go about specifically engaging those different communities. And also in regards to education standpoints, if they have different programs, specific programs for different jurisdictions, because it's all not within one state. So that would have been something that I would like to have seen a little bit more fleshed out. But overall, it appears that they have a strong strategy in regards to covering a universal situation, but it doesn't seem they can talk more about specific issues that or specific strategies they have for different regions that they're covering, because they are encompassing specifically a 3-state area, and they do draw from 2 additional states as well too. So we would like to see a little bit more detail in regards to that. In regards to the artistic quality, I felt that the information that they did provide gave a good representation in regards to what they do represent there at the museum and some of the programming there. I think that there was a good strong tie in regards to the way they artistically put together their materials based upon the information they put in their application. Lastly, I just think that, again, would like to see a little bit more discussion about how they address the different states, because they are unique situations.
Thank you, Tyrell. Susan,
Okay, I
anything
wanted
to add?
Thank you. I wanted to highlight one of their programs, which was the Healthy for Everyone program, which I think that was one of their science programs, which explored the top health concerns of the region and how it compared to the rest of the nations. And then that also tied into a new academic health research center in downtown Evansville. I thought that was a particularly strong program. One thing I noted about the board is it does have a good balance of professional, business, and community people, but there is no mention of other kinds of diversity, age, race, or gender diversity, no discussion of any of that. The other thing I wanted to acknowledge is that they have a really wonderful opportunity as a multidisciplinary museum with art, science, and history to draw parallels between all of those and to really talk about the relationships. And I think I would have liked to see that relationship explored a little bit more.
Thank you. Are there some additional comments?
Just in terms of grantsmanship, I think always thinking about how you're telling a full story. I think, and the language that you're using in one particular response, there was a reference to administrative or logistical complications. And I don't understand what that means as it relates to low-income families. And so language is really important in how organizations talk about the work that they are doing to serve their community, should and needs to be authentic. And either can sound authentic or sterile depending on the words that they elect to use. And so I think bringing through the how and the why of the programming and activities and how they relate to who the organization is trying to serve really would have been helpful to have more clarity around that, and finding distinct and defined responses for each of the questions, because in some cases I felt like I was just rereading some of the same stuff and trying to read through that to get to the actual work that they were trying to talk about. So it made it really challenging.
And I'll build on that with something specific in the community engagement section. For example, the question that was asked is, who are you wanting to see participate more in your programs in fiscal 20? And their answer described many of their arts education initiatives. It included the great outdoor classroom outreach boxes, but they never identified target populations as the question asks. So make sure that you actually have someone who hasn't read your application before read the question, read your answer, and see if you answered the question. That will help panelists, it will help you tell your story better. It would have made me score this higher.
Jeff, did you have something to add?
Just one quick note. So we always do our best to try to glean information from the narrative to line up with the review criteria. And so just one thing I couldn't find was when we get to arts education, what are the qualifications of those individuals? And I didn't really see anything for that other than the curator does it. and artists too, but then they could have added another sentence or maybe two to help work that out for us.
Thank you all so much. Going, gone. Update your scores, please. Not to be interpreted in a negative way. That wasn't a good idea. Okay, we're ready for application number 6, Indiana Symphony Society, and Jane's our first reader.
Yes. So the Indianapolis Symphony Orchestra has been an industry leader in initiating new ways to deliver orchestral music and fulfill its mission, such as the resident ensemble that they had time for free. That was something new in the industry. Hit the news. It's fielding a very broad variety of programs for an orchestra of its budget size, and that's impressive. And it has sought new ways to bring new ideas to the difficult task of integrating classical music in today's virtual culture. It does have financial challenges and seems to be facing them directly with the help of a professional strategic planner. But I have to say that the operating deficit for 2018 of nearly $1 million is sobering. However, they are working hard to focus their efforts where they will see the most return on their investments of time and personnel, including the strengthening of their endowment fund by means of planned giving. And I'll note that in terms of the orchestra world, that this is a fairly young major orchestra. What happens is that the musicians in the bargaining unit will always compare themselves with other major orchestras, some of which have had the opportunity for well over 100 years to build it out. So they do have some challenges there. In terms of community engagement, the number of vehicles developed to engage the greater community is very impressive. In particular, I was struck by the Metropolitan Youth Orchestra, the Second Chance Strings, which is very creative and engaging, and as is their involvement in the National Alliance for Audition Support, what an important thing to do for young aspiring musicians, and the sensory-friendly work with the Autism Society of Indiana. So I thought there was quite a wide range and spectrum of community engagement activities. A meaningful addition to all this fine work would be for them to become a Sphinx Organization partner orchestra, which I did not see mentioned. That would certainly add a great deal of richness to their encouragement of engaging African American musicians and featuring them in aligning that work with the Metropolitan Symphony, and I would hope that they would take the opportunity to do that. It's reasonable and it would be a good thing. Other vehicles to engage the community that were noted included the lunch break concerts, the intentional broad variety of programming in different venues, and work to make the ISO an active presence in the digital community as well. In arts education, I acknowledge that there seems to be some overlap in comments between community engagement and arts education, as the ISO seems to be very successfully addressing both of these important initiatives at the same time in several activities, such as the Metropolitan Youth Orchestra and the Digital Music Library Instant Encore, which, by the way, I couldn't access myself, but I'm not a subscriber, so maybe that had something to do with it, not to mention my paucity of technical skills. In addition, it's notable that they host 16,000 students at their Discovery concerts, which is huge, and have the teddy bear concerts for younger children. Also noted was the preparation for teachers to integrate the pre-concert educational material into their classrooms, as well as the ISO's work with the International School of Indiana, Global Prep Academy, reaching out to bilingual students. I thought these were all laudable. In terms of artistic quality, the Indianapolis Symphony has supported a major orchestra and has earned a well-deserved reputation, providing its community with years of excellent and varied programming. As one of the orchestra's nation's newer full-time orchestra continues to work hard to establish its financial stability. as I mentioned earlier, and it is to be commended for its ongoing efforts to reach the broadest audience possible and for its courage to innovate both in presentation and with its impressive scope of educational and outreach activities. I also would have liked to have seen in the work sample something that was a little more representative of the quality of the orchestra itself. Again, this may have been something that would have appeared on their Facebook or other items, but whatever I pulled up was the music itself was very brief. It was a very nice picture of people inviting others to come, a little promo, but the orchestra itself was not featured as much as it could have been, and the selection, which was from Firebird, was not titled. So, I mean, I knew what it was, but others may not.
Thank you, Jane. Ruby's our second reader on this. Something different or new?
All different and new. I appreciate their commitment to DEI work as both an opportunity and something to be addressed as an internal challenge and not just an external issue. And I really want to credit their development of a diversity task force. In community engagement, I do maybe slightly different, a little on the more constructive side, to just think about what information they can bring forward about the impact of each of the programs that they're presenting. So it's great to give tickets, but how many are being used? Who's coming to the programs? How is that comparing to who you're trying to reach? What prompted the decision to activate programs? What community gaps or drivers were the catalyst? Given the nature of the question, diverse or underserved communities, some statistical data or support information to convey the breadth of who you are trying to serve to balance who is participating. The Symphony and Color program is interesting, but I was left wondering what technical support is given to the teachers to conduct the program. It felt kind of passive in its reach and impact. I felt the applicant was broad and rather vague when it came to talking about who they want to see participate more in their programs. They say students, young people, diverse people, but nothing felt specific or targeted. And again, I appreciate the reference to free tickets, but again, how many are being used and how are they leveraging that, those relationships? From this end, it's more unclear how they are engaging with the community, involving them in the planning and evaluation. I'm rather surprised at the decision to cancel the concert for Black History Month, given that they have a DEI focus in their strategic plan. So it would have been helpful to have context around that decision. And you know, yes, it might be a disservice to relegate Black performers and composers to one concert, but it feels worse to see everything go completely. And the organization has had DEI in their strategic plan since 2015, which makes this decision to cancel that programming really interesting. I would have liked more information about how they are activating with the local community and specifically what they're doing in addition to training and talking. Incorporating sensory-friendly programming is great. I'm curious about the depth to which they are connecting with local families or participants. And I was a little jarred that the first time I read that they were even working with the Autism Society of Indiana was literally the last sentence of the narrative response to that question. So it generally just feels very at the community, not with the community, from the way that the narrative is constructed. So they may just want to consider, you know, having somebody take a look at the responses, as Karen mentioned for an earlier evaluation, just to kind of make sure that they're saying what they mean and being genuine about it. And forgive me, my computer does not want to move down. Oh, and I keep touching the wrong spot. Yeah. Arts education,
Yeah.
no, nothing else to add. Artistic quality, I have a couple things. So Jane mentioned the MYO, I forget what the M's for, Metropolitan Youth Orchestra. So let me pause there for a second. The samples of work were really engaging and well designed. I appreciated the Your Invited video, but it felt a little tokeny given what they stated about challenges in seeing representation of their community. And then optically, it was a stark comparison to see the opening images and then follow it with images of the orchestra. It is completely different demographically, and it just didn't feel genuine. So they may want to consider how they're bringing that diversity, what it means, where it's manifesting, and think about how they're doing that in a very authentic way. I also want to call out that I noticed on their website in the Metropolitan Youth Orchestra section, what are at-risk behaviors? So sometimes that language is coded and means something. So just say what you mean what you say, and just use the words. And I think that's more appropriate than hiding it behind at-risk behaviors. At risk of what? It's also clear that the artistic quality is present, a focus demonstrated by the caliber of the performance presented in the series and the thoughtfulness of the materials provided in the teaching guide. And I have to say that I was really intrigued by the whole Metropolitan Youth Orchestra thing. And so just more information about that. If you're going to talk about it and include it, what are the demographics of the participants in that program compared to the community? What kind of impact is that making? I saw that there was like fees related, but what does that mean? So I just felt like I had a lot of questions that just didn't get answered. So again, when you're thinking about a complete package, just taking that moment to have someone unfamiliar with this process, take a look at your application and make sure that the story that you're trying to tell is really coming through in the narrative and the content that you're providing.
Thank you. Any additional comments? Jeff?
Just one, I appreciated the statement earlier in the narrative that discussed that they use their feedback from audiences to help with their planning and their programming, which is great. I mean, there's a lot of benefit to that, but also including benefit or feedback from your artists are great too. Those two together can bring a lot of light into your organization. And the You're Invited clip that was on there, I just noted that it was similar to this creating connection style of advertising of nonprofits, where rather than just showing a poster of the lion thing, that's not trademarked by the way, is that they're just showing the poster and the people on stage doing stuff, that they actually focus more on the audience, who's attending and who, so then the people can see themselves there. And so that's kind of a shortcoming that's happening in the nonprofit world. Interesting.
Anything else?
Just a couple of additional points. I'm going to echo Jane's concern about their financial situation. I know they're battling back from some tough times. Their line of credit is a concern in addition to the deficit. But with all of that, applause for limiting themselves to a 5% draw on their endowment. They could fix this problem by taking from the future, and they're not. So applause to them for the fiscal discipline there. I had a different take on the canceled Black History Month concert. What I gleaned from the application was they worked hard to talk with community partners about doing that, and I was actually pleased to see it. I would like to see more orchestras step forward and say, let's not just move this into one day. Let's think about how we do this in a more comprehensive way. So I took that as a positive thing, actually. And Jeff's comments about the You're Invited video as their artistic sample, while it's always nice to hear the orchestra play, I concur with that piece. I felt invited to come to the ISO. It was very friendly and welcoming, and I think that speaks well to the way they are presenting.
Thank you, Karen. Any additional comments? All right, then let's update our scores, please. Okay, we are ready now for application number 7, the Indiana Repertory Theater. And Karen's our first reader.
I'm still opening here, so give me
All
one
right.
second.
After which we'll take a break.
Okay, Indiana Repertory Theater. This is the only LORT theater in Indiana, and I found that their programs are very well aligned to their mission. They have a nice mix of theater favorites as well as new works and works that feature Indiana artists and Indiana playwrights, which is great. They spend a lot of time in the application talking about using live theater to shape perspectives and to find common ground. And it's interesting that they chose to describe the entire state as underserved when it comes to live theater. To echo comments from earlier, be very thoughtful with the language you choose to use. Underserved might mean people who don't have access to live theater. In some cases, underserved is actually referring to different racial, ethnic, or gender groups. So let's be clear and say what we mean. If most people in Indiana don't have access to live theater, maybe there's a better word than underserved. That said, their programming seems fresh with lots and lots and lots of partnerships with community organizations. It sounds like they are very much a planning and learning organization, which is great to see. They are in the midst of an $18.5 million capital campaign, and they've raised $17 million of it, which is tremendous. I appreciated the specificity on their board demographics in the application, and they talk about increases in the number of women, younger members, and member of color on the board, which is terrific. Whenever I see an exactly balanced budget, I'm always asking the question of, that seems unlikely, but clearly they're using some funds from elsewhere to balance their budget. I would encourage them to continue to budget for surplus, not simply budget to balance, to continue to build strength for the future. It is laudable that they want to pull back to 4.5% draw on their endowment. Let's see, my cursor's jumping around here, forgive me. For community engagement, their Artists in Classrooms programs reaches 9 counties beyond Indianapolis, so that gets to the multi-regional impact that they have. They are aiming for a statewide presence with partnerships at both DePaul, and they describe a very substantive partnership with the United Way of Central Indiana, and this is a way that they're reaching different children in different places in partnerships with childcare centers and with libraries. They had an excellent and detailed description of who they want to reach, stretching beyond African American audiences to also include Native American and Asian American audiences in coming seasons. I really appreciated the specificity there. The inclusion series really seems like a great start, and they have a council that informs the series, which feels two-way. And I appreciated their comment about the council's role in listening to communities before programs are created. Hooray for that. The staff and the board are undergoing some diversity, equity, and inclusion training, and they are aiming to have a directory of diversity and inclusion on staff by 2020, which is laudable. I appreciated the description of their sensory-friendly programs and their programs for the differently abled. And of any that I have looked at, their commitment to true engagement really does shine through this narrative. For arts education, they describe solid programs. I noted that they reserve 40% of their calendar for educational programming, which really speaks to the role of educational programming in this institution's work, and that was a very helpful statistic. It sounds like they serve students from 53 counties around the state, which is again a great demonstration of multi-regional presence, solid descriptions of those who benefit, and a good description of the social emotional learning benefits of theater, though more specifics would be helpful here. When it comes to artistic quality, the video certainly demonstrated the breadth and quality of their artistic works. It would be helpful to have more images of the audience, not just of the performers. I felt that the website was useful and the materials were engaging. And I noted that they have an education fund that helps ensure that folks have access to their work, which is terrific. All around, it was a well-produced education application in my opinion.
Thank you, Karen. Jeff.
Oh, man. Okay. Just only like 4 or 5 things, that's it. Because I kept telling myself, oh, check that out. So do my evaluation.
Good for you.
Great. I just got a sense they were really committed to lifelong learning and education through their programming. I thought, what better way to get Indiana patronage than to do the Indiana series of works about Indiana and the Midwest. That was pretty keen to let theaters do that, which was great. I really appreciated that accessibility is a priority for IRT, as well as their equity and diversity and inclusion trainings for their staff, and they're also pursuing funding to do an audit and how to increase that as well. That was nice. I thought I'm not going to quote it, but the last part of the arts and education, the part D, I thought there was a great statement there about their take on theater experiences and its benefits. And finally, all in all, I thought it was a well-written narrative, and the entries seemed to be carefully drafted.
Thank you. Any different kinds of comments?
The only comment that I would like to add is specifically since they stated that they're able to reach out to 53 of the 92 counties, it would have been nice to learn what they're doing in those counties while they have interaction and what they could possibly do to reach their other counties that they're not currently served.
One additional thing, I just thought it was really great that they had a specific endowment for education, and I think that's reflected in their focus and all the things they do educationally with the community.
Okay, then let's update our scores.
Is everybody ready for a break?
Ray, or do you want to do a couple more? Okay.
Okay, yeah.
Then we'll take a break.
No, that's.
Yeah, about 10 minutes. That would be 11:10.
Or if you're,
You say we're taking
we will begin again. And we will move on to application number 8, the Indianapolis Children's Choir, and Jeff is our first reader.
Hey, Indianapolis Children's Choir inspired student achievement for music education and overall performance. I like that they are seeking to bridge culture, ethnicity, and economic background via personal and social growth, diversity, access, safety, creativity, and excellence. It's noteworthy that they provide professional development to educators as well as internships to arts and arts admin majors and children helping children. They've grown to become a respected children's choir, designated the Singing Ambassadors of Indianapolis, which is probably not a common title. And every section seems like it has some sort of request or request for evaluation. So evaluation, measurement by enrollment, retention, but also always looking for seeking written feedback. They completed an endowment campaign that signified a change in their finances, but still found it favorable. Scrolling. There's a lot of scrolling in this application, all these applications. I like the fact that they work directly in concert with teachers and schools, allows them to provide free services for thousands of children. And they note that the programming is stable, but they still make efforts to try to reach busy families up to date. And they continuously evaluate in their community and their needs to adapt. And they state that their regional locales are due in part to their relationships with teachers and administration. And their expansion of neighborhood choir academy may ease some barriers in some communities. And again, soliciting feedback and engaging in dialogue with teachers, staff, students, and families. I think it's good. Arts and education, I found it to be an effective overview of activities, good bios of key personnel with clearly defined outcomes, evidence of quality of arts and education programming, as well as professional development for staff in the field. Overall, good application packet demonstrating their commitment to providing arts education to youth through choral practice, and they appear to be dedicated to providing programming to youth along with the benefit of encouraging self-expression and confidence in growth.
Thank you, Jeff. Jane, something to add to that?
Yes, I too was impressed by the great breadth of performance opportunities in pre-K through 12 students in the classroom. And the laudable mission that provides an experience for many of its participants that they'll remember throughout their lives. In terms of organizational excellence, and I would encourage this applicant to use the template provided for a balance sheet. I have here a collage of what I printed out of the material before we got the revised one, and it was impossible to answer some of the questions that I had from the information that was there. And again, should the applicant use the template that was provided, I'm sure they would find it very helpful because it would help them as well. Questions that I had that I was not able to answer is that although it looked as if the organization was working within its budget, there were large increases in endowment income that I saw that I couldn't account for in the information provided. Also, given the worthwhile activities that this organization is doing, I think they would be helped even more by a strategic plan that is more specific in its strategies, along with measures of success, both lagging and leading, some timelines and quantified budget numbers that would really help put this organization in its great goals and that would really give them some traction and get them moving. Let me see. Lots of community engagement. The list of organizations with which the children's choir collaborates is very impressive. And many education activities were listed. Programs, both teachers and students, were noted. And again, implementation of measures of success might well leverage the worthwhile efforts and produce even more recognizable results.
Thank you very much. Anything to add to this?
I would like to just suggest to the organization to provide specificity around the makeup of their board, that it's just not compelling enough to say you have broad representation. It's much more compelling to define what that representation looks like, what it means to you as an organization, and how it represents and reflects your community. And I would also like to encourage the organization to consider what diversity, equity, inclusion, and access means, and how that's manifesting in their practices internally and externally, especially as them being kind of in the middle of their current strategic plan. They'll be thinking about what that's going to mean next, and also especially as they think about what their succession plan looks like. And I think that's it.
Thank you, Ruth. Anybody else have anything to add? Okay, great. Then let's update our scores. That being accomplished, we will move on to applicant number 9. The International Violin Competition of Indianapolis, and James, our first reader.
Yes. In terms of organizational excellence, while recognizing the quadrennial construction of the applicant, a clearer explanation of its financial tracking and reporting for grant application needs to be developed in order to communicate accurate understanding of the organization's funding parameters. While the applicant indicates that the organization operates within a balanced budget, the report submitted did not support this assertion, at least not to my mind. Perhaps separate profit and loss statements for the organization's different programming centers and thus cost centers would help, but I would urge them to do that. I think that in the past there have been some verbal explanations that have been given, but it didn't translate to this reviewer's reading of the application. In terms of community engagement, they show evidence of producing a variety of programs that engage music students, as well as its collaboration with other arts and cultural organizations in the area, such as the Metropolitan Youth Orchestra and other performing arts organizations, the public library, historic museums and schools, as well as broadcast media. The narrative refers often to the number and importance of volunteers. This is certainly impressive, and it provides some community engagement, but it's very passive. And I wasn't sure how this experience for the volunteers was this really being harvested for all that could be done? Were there students involved? Hard to know what was happening. In terms of artistic quality, arts education, sorry, I missed that. And I think that the International Violin Competition is in itself a unique educational opportunity, not only in the state, but in the nation. And its ancillary activities beyond the competition itself are very impressive. And I say that because so many excellent young musicians have been launched by this organization, and anybody who has worked with professional orchestras knows of the people who have won this competition and the unique support that they provide for these young emerging violinists with their development, their career, let alone the provision of excellent instruments that they could never afford to purchase is impressive. So it is unique and it is a standout. I've morphed into my artistic quality with those comments. But the list of laureates is really very, very impressive, and it is well known to music directors and administrators of professional orchestras throughout the country. Its mission is unique and well fulfilled.
Second reader.
I think that's me.
It's Karen.
I think that's me.
I distracted her.
Okay.
I figured we needed a little jump.
There you go. To add to,
I am on track.
it's all good. To add to Dane's comprehensive review, yes, on the organizational excellence, I appreciate that in the strategic plan, there is a 4-year budget that goes with the plan. That is helpful to see. It's the way it's laid out, it's hard to understand without doing a lot of math, which is fine. Are they aiming for, they're uneven because they're every 4 years, right? So you're going to expect some of that some years are going to be stronger than others. it would be helpful if they could find a clearer way to represent in the aggregate over the 4-year period, are they aiming for surplus or deficit? Where are those funds going to come from, et cetera, et cetera. So just something to think about. I do appreciate that they're not doing the plan without doing the budget. Budget drives how the plan will carry out. Also on the organizational piece, I noted that there are 6 of their 27 board members who have an extraordinarily long tenure on the board, over 15 years. And I would encourage them to think about that as they're thinking about board diversity. There was not much specificity about that here, and as they're thinking about who needs to serve and who represents the community, long length of tenure can be helpful. It can also be a signal that you are doing the same kind of thinking over and over and over again. So just noted and encourage them to pay attention to that as they move forward. In scrolling, pardon me, in the artistic quality piece, I did note, in the arts education piece, their answer would have really been benefited from, again, using some of the tips that the organization provided, where they say, answer questions, you coding them using the prompts, A, B, C, and D. You answered the questions in this section, but I really had to look around to find them. So help a panelist read this by being not just specific in who's going to benefit from your education programs, but also in answering the questions in the order that they were asked. That would be particularly helpful. I thought the video of the competition really helped bring it to life for someone who has never observed it personally. I thought that was particularly helpful. Throughout the application, the commission is asking you to talk about your commitment to underserved audiences, and I'm assuming that means those who may not have the economic means, those of different social or racial or ethnic communities. That commitment I did not see here listed very clearly throughout the entire application. And because they are asking it of you, I would encourage the organization to think carefully about what that commitment is. They have a huge commitment to extraordinary international artists, and that is laudable. They are also an Indiana-based institution taking public funds from the state of Indiana. And so I really encourage you to think about your commitment to underserved audiences in the work that you're doing.
Thank you, Karen. Any other comments? Jeff?
Just a few. I never quite caught what Joseph Gingold's vision was, other than a lot of the work was based on it. Didn't see that. Had a hard time figuring out where the community and audience fit into the organization. It refers to a measurement of success and other is measured on multiple levels, but I don't know what the levels are. But I appreciate the financial explanation that was added. That's it.
Anybody else have an additional comment? Tyrone?
Yeah, well, just looking at it, it says, and just looking at what their overall application and talk about their program, it appears that their marketing strategies are targeting organizations or audiences that are already participating in the classical arts and music. I don't see how the outreach with methods would reach someone who is not associated with this form of music. I would recommend that they consider expanding their outreach to demographics that are not currently active participants in their programs. It will serve two purposes: expose individuals who normally would not consider the violin as an instrument they would be interested in, either listening to or playing, and it would begin to grow their current and future client customers so that they can have a stronger, brighter, more diverse organization in the future. Also, based upon their inclusion, diversity, and equity and access plan, there is no demonstration that this line of thinking has occurred within the organization. I would recommend that they talk to other organizations who may have done this type of outreach to see how they can incorporate some of those strategies within their own organization. The other things are just kind of similar to this art education and their outreach. It doesn't seem like they're targeting or individuals or communities outside of those who would be already open to working with them. They're not looking at diversifying and broadening out their scope and reaching out to audiences that have not really thought about that. And I would just encourage them to think about strategies in which they can reach outside their comfort zone and expand their opportunities to reach those who may be interested in it but never have been exposed to this type of venue.
There again, the SNCS organization might be a very good partner for these folks.
I just want to add one more thing. I thought it was great that they added in a little bit of a letter from a former competitor, and I also think it's commendable that they have a post-competition professional development for the artists after.
Any other comments? Okay, we've covered it. Let's update our scores and we'll be ready to move on to number 10, which is music for all. And Tyrone, you're our first reader.
Okay. This program has a very strong track record of operating at a very high level. They have demonstrated the ability to operate high-quality programs that attract participants from all over the U.S. here in the state of Indiana. They also developed a very detailed strategic plan to help the organization move forward. That plan, which was an aid to me to script, it basically to see where the organization is currently going and where they plan on going, and really laid out a really good roadmap in regards to how they plan on doing it. So it gives, and I would commend them for doing such a detailed strategic plan because it gives them a very structured roadmap and blueprint to show them where they're going and where there may be blips on the way to help guide their future decisions. They were also able to add diversity to their program offerings. We just gave this organization focused on marching bands to incorporating all forms of instrumental music, orchestra, jazz, all those other things. So I commend them for being able to expand their initial offerings to become a more diverse organization. In regards to community engagement, this is one of the few programs that I saw within this group that actually had embraced their mission to reach out to other segments within the state with specific programs and targeted initiatives that are geared towards those specific communities instead of just trying to take a one-shot approach and just kind of broaden it out. And I was also very impressed that they're demonstrating to develop strong community partners in those communities to really engage with what they're doing and expand on that. One thing I would like to see if there's any discussion about taking those models and going to other areas of the state that, because they have such a strong track record in doing so with those. As far as the arts instruction, they're incorporating a very structured school-based curriculum within their programs, which is very encouraging. And they're promoting standardizing the music to the standardized standards that are within the state. So they're complementing what's going on within the state instead of trying to supplement what's going on there, which is very unique. They're also utilizing their events to educate the general public about different types of music and presentation styles, which I think is very encouraging as well too. I think that by being associated with the national organization, this provides an opportunity to tap into other resources that may not just be available to them just by being here locally here in Indiana, and bringing some of those best thought processes back here to the community they're serving. In regards to the artistic quality, I felt that the information that they provide was very thorough in regards to demonstrating what they're doing and gave a good representation about the types of programs that they do, the types of initiatives they're involved in, and how they engage their participants.
Thank you very much, Tyrone. Ruby, something to add?
Yeah, I want to shout out their frames of accessibility in their strategic plan around guiding their efforts for expansion and participation. I felt that really came through consistently in the narrative. I wanted to also commend their targeted efforts to increase board diversity, including just a little bit more information though about how they plan to succeed with the measures that they're setting forward, or to share specific goals around continuing to increase that representation. I also appreciated their focus on succession planning. I think that's always important. I wanted to also shout out that providing, having the stats and details to give context to the makeup of their current board was really helpful, and I appreciated how they are viewing intersectional identities as well. For community engagement, as Tyrone stated, they have a really robust programming offering. They're very authentic in the way that they are engaging community. I also wanted to call out that when I was watching the samples of work, I noticed a reference to United Sound, which is one of the programs that they run that seemed really interesting in terms of community engagement and serving differently abled communities, and I was really kind of like, why didn't they include that? So look at the full breadth of what your organization is offering and include all of that that may be relevant to demonstrating the way that you're deepening your relationship and serving everyone in your community, and not just kind of the, gosh, I hate to say it this way, but like the usual suspects of diversity, equity, and inclusion work. Because it really is about embracing your whole community and making sure that everyone is represented there. So just to note that, like, I would have loved to have seen more and heard more and understood how that program plays out in, the artistic quality. I just also wanted to call out that I really enjoyed their YouTube channel that they submitted as part of their samples of work. It was really engaging and accessible. I loved the quick tip videos. And so, yeah, great job.
Thank you, Ruby. Anybody have anything opposing point of view, something different?
Just a shout out for the I-65 corridor project, which engages students in urban schools in not only in Indianapolis, but Gary and Muncie, and then all the way to Mobile, Alabama. I just think that's really excellent initiative.
Yes, Karen.
I have a slightly different take, and I'm happy to be corrected by my colleagues. A couple of places. In the area around community engagement, there was a lot of language about their target population being every student. And that was what place where I was looking for a little bit more focus. I think everyone feels really broad. So is there a way to sort of pull it in from that? I was looking for more evidence of the two-way program creation and evaluation, and maybe I just missed it given the strong comments from my smart colleagues here. I had a question around the arts education piece, and it doesn't need to be debated here, but I was curious about their programs and if they are a pay for participation model. And if that is true, then how do they include those who can't afford to pay? And what does that mean for the increasing the diversity and richness of those who are participating? I just didn't see it, and maybe it's there and somebody's going to correct me, but that could have used more explanation. And then my last piece, the artistic sample, I should have dug into the YouTube channels more, so that's on me. The one artistic sample that I saw had a video that showcased all of their programs, and it showed students making music together, which was awesome. And the audio on the video was not of those same students. It was like canned audio behind a video of students playing band music. And I would have liked to have heard the kids playing the music, right? So just note to self, if you're going to showcase, let's hear some of them in addition to other kinds of things.
Showcase.
Any other additional comments? Opposing points of view? All right, then let's go ahead and update our scores, and we will move along to application number 11, the Indianapolis Museum of Art. Susan, you're our first reader.
Okay. I will say up front that I'm very impressed with this organization. It's very difficult not to be. And again, some of you may disagree with that. It operated as the Indianapolis Museum of Art until, it started as the Indianapolis Museum of Art in 1969. Prior to that, it was founded in 1883, but it was changed to Newfields. The name was changed to Newfields to represent all of their holdings. It's one of the 10 largest art museums in the country and features collections of African, American, Asian, European design and fashion, conservation laboratory, theater, an amphitheater, the Virginia B. Fairbanks Art and Nature Park, historic gardens, 2 national historic properties, the Lilly House and Gardens on the campus, and the Miller House and Garden in Columbus, Indiana. So it's huge, more than just a property. It's almost a community unto itself. And so it was incorporated again under the name of Newfields in 2017. The mission is to enrich lives through exceptional experiences with art and nature, and I think they truly do accomplish exceptional experiences. They offer very diverse exhibitions that are excellent visually as well as in terms of their scholarship. I commend their partnership in the White River, their partnership with the
the White River, which serves environmental stewardship, seeking to improve the water quality and create an educational access point within the Fairbanks Park. I do believe they're a clear leader in the region, the state, and the country. In 2018, almost 72% of their participation came from their region, but close to 30% from around the state and nation and world. Staff members have excellent expertise and share that through publishing and presenting. They were recognized for excellence with the Violin endowment grant for $7.5 million. Their core values currently are stewardship, service, and excellence. Staff members and board members are recommending that they add a core value of inclusivity, which I think is excellent. The plan is reviewed annually during leadership retreats, board reviews, that report on progress at each meeting, and the goals and evaluations are based on the plan. This is a plan that was created, well, it's a 10-year plan, but there is no indication about how the current 10-year plan was created. So it would have been, excuse me, helpful to understand how that original plan was created, whether there was community input on that particular plan and what that process was. Board is a balance of professional backgrounds, meets 5 times a year. There's also a governing board of young professionals and leaders, which is the feeder group for the board, and they play a role in advocacy. There are also 6 affiliate boards and 12 committees, including a nominating committee, which assures board succession and diversity, which is very commendable. And the museum is going to use AAM standards that are currently being developed to provide a framework for developing more inclusive boards. Again, there's no indication of the current racial, gender, or age diversity on the board. Financial position is very strong and improving. The endowment draw in fiscal year 2018 was 4.99%, with a target rate for 2019 of 4.5%. The commensurate projected expense for 2019 shows a decrease of $1.5 million from the 2018 actual to make up for that lower endowment draw. Revenue for the admissions, however, is projected to almost double from 2018 actual to 2019 projected, and they have good strategies for doing that. Community engagement, excellent and many community engagement activities, both on-site and off-site. Their planning and partnership efforts are thorough and ambitious. Ongoing programs include off-site programs, including hospital arts program, where docents provide monthly visits to Riley Hospital for Children. Monster Drawing Rally highlights local artists, increases community exposure. Miller House in Columbus, Indiana serves more than 6,000 visitors annually. ArtX Mobile delivers programs at community events statewide. And there are educator resources and school tours. Ongoing on-site programs include a number of film festivals, which include partnerships with many different partners within the community. Other ongoing programs that increase accessibility are Access Pass for needy families, Teen Arts Council, touch and audio tours for blind and partially sighted visitors, and maybe at the IMA for people with early stages Alzheimer's and their care partners. They also have a distribution program and partner with 12 organizations to distribute 5,000 free tickets for their winter rides programs to those with financial barriers. Great initiative is the multimodal path, which addresses physical accessibility to campus for neighbors and non-vehicular visitors. Outstanding efforts are made through special exhibitions and programs, developing partnerships with related communities. One recent example, which I think was highly commendable and I think really really innovative and exciting is the Community Meal Partner, staged by artist Setu Jones, which activates community resources in every aspect of the project. The goal is to illustrate how artists and institutions can transform unjust food urban systems through creative collaboration. They have 24 partners, many of them neighborhood associations and churches for the planning of the project. And it's a goal to include audiences from the African American, Japanese American, and student, graduate, and undergraduate populations. Their Seasons of Japan exhibition, they're gauging the growing Japanese American community. There are 200 Japanese companies in Indiana, employing about 40,000 workers. They've met with the Japanese American Society, Honda, and Subaru to collaborate. The 2020 reinstallation of the American galleries is looking at how American art has been interpreted through the lens of white European original males. And so they're looking at confronting the issues of white supremacy and sexism, also multiple planning partners for that. A broad range of educational programs offered, including, again, multiple audiences. I think that they seem to be particularly good at reaching out to the community for ongoing dialogue. They work strongly with teachers and teacher training, serve many different age groups of youth from toddlers on up. They have specifically a child center right at Newfields, which is for ages 3 to 5, and they have a museum-based preschool that uses the entire campus as the classroom. After-school programs, which gives students from partner schools a chance to 12 times throughout a semester. All activities are created and implemented by a strong core of professionally trained staff members, skilled education providers through partnerships, professional artists, and docents.
Susan, excuse me, as our time's kind of getting here, can you just sort of highlight more and evaluate?
I actually just going to go straight to artistic quality. I think they demonstrate the highest artistic quality. The application is well written, communicated, obviously volumes of information, proven leader in the state and nation, and commitment for the work.
Thank you very much. Tyrone, something to add?
The only thing I would add is I think that they've done a good job. It's kind of difficult for a museum to do programming and outreach outside of their physical plant. But I think that they have attempted to do so in certain areas, and I just would encourage them to continue to explore more ways in which they can go out to the community, explore what they're doing, and expose and educate the community about what's going on their physical plant, and encourage more people to come on and also engage outside of their physical plant.
Thank you. Are there any other additional comments as we look at strengths and opportunities?
I would have liked the organization to be more specific about what diversity means to them in all aspects where they reference it. Attracting diverse talent, recruiting diverse board members, just being able to be really specific conveys a stronger commitment to actual diversity, equity, and inclusion efforts, and puts context into how this compares to their community demographics and representation. I also wanted to call out that this again is one of the few groups that was able to account for how many free tickets they gave to which partners and how many in total were redeemed. But I would have liked more information about the analysis of that and strategies for adjusting. They put out 5,000, but only roughly 2,500 come back. So what does that mean to them? What are they seeing in that data? I also appreciated the thoughtfulness with which the organization is approaching relationships, but I would like to see more of the dialogue versus just feeling like they're feeling that they're doing things to the community. Understanding more about the roles and the voice of the groups that they are involving may be more compelling than simply the long laundry list of organizations they're interacting with. And it is a delicate balance, I want to acknowledge that, but it's one that gives a more meaningful representation of the work and the interaction and the relationships, and really centers the community and the conversation and the activation. For arts education, I also want to acknowledge the inclusion of homeschool populations, which is you don't see very often in narratives. And
Thank you, Ruby. Any other new comments?
It's one of the best planning processes integrated into the operation of the organization. Give that a shout out. I was impressed.
Thank you. Okay, let's update our scores. And we'll move on to application number 12, the Children's Museum of Indianapolis. And Ruby, you're our first reader.
oh, right, just wait. My computer to cooperate.
You know,
I know it's not there.
It doesn't,
It
move it a
doesn't
little
touch,
slower
yeah,
here.
and it's not a touch screen, and I'm way too used to my computer. Organizational excellence, the narrative in this section was well constructed and clear. I appreciated the level of detail and evidence of being an arts leader and how they approach innovative programming. I felt they provided context to how their board members are activated and the intentionality behind recruitment. The strategic plan is clear and detailed and aligned with their mission. I also felt that while they also have science and humanities as part of their programming mission, they've clearly thought out how to infuse all areas of their institution with the arts. Their financials were clear, and I appreciated the detailed information that they provided in the narrative. For community engagement, again, a very strong narrative section. I really appreciated the context and the how and why of the work that they're doing for community engagement as it relates to the measures put forth by the Indiana Arts Commission, specifically the Mid-North Promise Program and their outreach and professional development work. Exclamation point. It is clear that the organization is thoughtful about who and how they are engaging underserved audiences and community members. I found the information shared was insightful and intentional in nature and really demonstrated the embrace of idea in the organization's programming and development efforts. Really exemplary efforts in the area of inclusion, and the commitment is clear. Exclamation point. The applicant for arts education, the applicant clearly describes both the breadth and depth of their arts education. I appreciated the holistic approach and the embedded nature of the learning opportunities throughout their programming. I would have liked more information on specifics around who is benefiting and how. I felt that that was a weak response without much detail. The arts and arts education outcomes are clear, but some additional detail, even around just one program, would have been helpful to understand how it all comes together. For artistic quality, it's hard to say the majority of their programming is arts-based, but it is clear from the materials that arts are infused and valued in their programming. The website was engaging and easy to navigate. The social media platforms were engaging and visually interesting and not repetitive, and the marketing materials submitted were very well designed and straightforward. Strong application.
Thank you, Ruby. Jeff, something new to add to that comment?
Sure. Other than stating it's the largest museum of its kind, I kind of struggled a little bit to kind of make a connection between how the organization is a leader in arts and culture, other than by square footage and by numbers that was thrown out there. Community engagement, to add on to Ruby's, they created a 504 coordinator in 2018.
Yes.
Okay, and so with that, they're looking into century-friendly hours, they're seeking input by recruiting accessibility advisor families, in order to help their exhibits experiences become more inclusive as possible, which again is fantastic. And I'll leave it with this. That's on my comment. Okay, it's evident that they have the staff and resources to research as well as delve into new areas of programming, and that they are committed to providing intergenerational programming and access to all of them.
Thank you, sir. Any other, Susan?
Yeah, just a couple of comments about artistic quality. I think, yes, their focus is not specifically the arts, but they are looking to integrate an arts element into nearly every future exhibition that they do. And I think one of the things that really speaks to me about artistic quality about this organization is essentially everything they do. You know, there's a level of quality and aesthetics about everything that they do that I think really speaks outstanding artistic quality.
Mm-hmm.
Any other burning points of view? All right, thank you. Let's update those scores. And shall we do a drum roll now? On to number 13, the Honeywell Foundation, and our first reader is Karen.
So one of the first things I appreciated about this application was the writer's clear description of who they are and what they do and how they are a public charity, how they are operating and doing programs. When you just read Honeywell Foundation, you ask yourself, why are they here? And they answered that, why are they here, very directly, right up front. So kudos to the writer who helped someone from out of town understand. They are in a more rural part of Indiana. They bring that through the application as well. This organization, the programs are very aligned with their mission. They are doing a lot between a performance venue and museums and urban gardens and renovating a historic movie theater and operating a drive-in. There's a lot going on that's under the auspice of the Honeywell Foundation. And in addition to all of that work, their new strategic plan really outlines even a more expansive vision for the future. They're talking about and demonstrating engaged civic leadership through work on some of their local economic development councils, and they're talking about international cultural exchange. So pleased to see that they're really trying to be a citizen of the region in addition to being a place where lots of things happen. Their strategic plan is fine. It's very tactical. I was curious that the first goal that they outlined was really about talent attraction and staff engagement. And that makes me just wonder if all of this growth has not showcased perhaps some places where their staff could use some more support. So I hope that they are finding and seeking the resources that they need to do that. This is a very fiscally sound organization thanks to a nearly $40 million endowment. The draw on their endowment helps them balance the budget and represented nearly 30% of their revenue in fiscal 18. They do state as a goal the opportunity to pull away from balancing the budget with the endowment and being more self-sustaining moving forward, and I think that's laudable. Under community engagement, they serve a rural community, and they, even while some of their efforts are engagement are in the early stages, I do see demonstrated commitment to two-way feedback loops in all of the activities that they describe. They're taking education programs to schools and senior centers throughout the region. They're developing programs that connect with Spanish-speaking students in rural communities in new ways, and they are talking to people to understand what the needs are and then developing programs with that in mind, which is exactly the kind of two-way thing you want to see. They identify seniors and young families as target populations, and they have outlined reasonable strategies for reaching them. I appreciated the attention to reaching people who are differently abled. Again, even if they're in the early stages of this work, going to large print programs and those kinds of things, that at least says they're paying attention to this and they're trying to take the steps that they can take with the relatively small budget for the amount of work that they're doing that they pull together. The artistic sample that they provided, the video link here was a little bit hard to watch. They flew graphics in over all of the images of all the great work that was happening, and it was harder to see the work, and we just concentrated on the graphics. So just a note to, again, as we've said earlier today, have somebody look at your materials who's not part of your organization. They may be able to give you some friendly, constructive criticism about how to better tell your story with the materials that you have. Under arts education, I thought the programs were well described, and they included the state learning standards throughout, which was helpful. They could use more specificity with Part B of the question when it came to who benefits, particularly from who from either underserved audiences or the differently abled. There is some of this language earlier in the application, so make sure you pull it through to answer this question here. The qualifications of the staff seem fine. It was hard to gauge the quality of the programs from the material or the video, so again, that would be something to consider for the future. Put your best foot forward with your samples so that we can really gauge what you're doing and how you're doing it. For artistic quality, the sound of, they showcase some of the extraordinary things that come to the Honeywell Center that include things like the Academy of St. Martin Fields. So clearly there was some onstage wonderful quality. It was harder to judge the quality based on the video of the student performances that were there. I wasn't sure what the opera singers were doing in classrooms singing in other languages. It may have been absolutely relevant, but you couldn't tell that by looking at it. So again, have somebody who is not so close to your organization take a look at those things and try to see the story that you're telling through your materials. The website is interesting. You do have to scroll quite a bit to finally see images of art in action, which there is a lot of at the Honeywell Foundation. There's a lot of activity there. The static image of a cute little girl ballerina on the front, you scroll a whole long way to find other kinds of activities and images. And if I'm new, if I'm trying to come in and I'm trying to decide, is this for me, it takes me a long time on the website to find something that might attract me. So just thinking about how you appear to new people, I think would also be particularly helpful. All of that said, this is an organization that clearly wants to reach people with arts and culture in their corner of Indiana between Fort Wayne and Lafayette in a much more rural place, and I think they are well on the way to doing that.
Thank you, Karen. Our second reader, Jane.
Yes, I had many of the same observations that Karen had. And I totally agree that the explanation with the clear history and purpose and its programming seeming to reflect its purpose was critically important, because I too looked at this and said, what's this? So that was good to have that. They appear to be a cultural leader in the community. The board does meet regularly and is working to diversify its makeup and evaluate the board's performance, which is excellent. That's good for any board to do. They are solvent due to significant funds, and we've discussed that. Strategic plan, I thought, wasn't as specific as to changes the organization feels it needs to make, apart from the notation that it is working to attain a balanced operations budget each year. Community engagement, they do seem to, first of all, it can't be easy because they live, they're placed in a very dispersed audience. So their community itself, or the physical location of the facility is quite small, and the population is 10,000. I think I read that. Was good that they have partnerships with other organizations, other schools and senior living communities. I myself didn't pick up on a whole lot of evidence as to whether or not that was a two-way conversation or if it was simply offered and gladly accepted. However, that probably could be very difficult to do in a sparsely populated area, even with technology that's available. But certainly they're looking for ways to engage all demographics in the area that it reaches. Under arts education, they've made a noticeable effort with their arts education, with the research and implementation of the BTS and OP programs. And the programming for children is certainly designed to serve the Hispanic community, of which they have apparently identified as being a target audience. Under artistic quality, Karen, if I interpreted what you were saying, this is something I too struggle with. Sponsoring the New York Philharmonic, Beverly Sills, academies in Martin Fields over time. Yes, absolutely, that's certainly a quality. Our oldies, country music, and comedy shows aren't. That's a question that I would place out there. Is there a curatorial viewpoint in booking performers? This is always something I think that is important in multidisciplinary organizations. And then finally, just taking a look at the staffing list, we have equal parts grade and grounds and maintenance, which is certainly understandable given the gardens and the facility itself. Arts and education, and then the restaurant, which comprises a good portion of their employee list. That being said, there are other organizations that do run for-profit businesses as a means of funding their organizations. So, that in and of itself it doesn't disqualify them, but how much of a balance in the organization is spent on catering and renting out for anniversary parties and so forth versus the arts? That is a question that I have. However, they seem deeply engaged in the community and obviously working hard to do as many things as they can.
Are there additional thoughts?
I want to highlight a comment that stood out to me. So they said one of their board members' family business serves a diverse community, and to me that's a little problematic because it is best practice to have community speak for itself and not have somebody speak on their behalf. And so not having, so I would encourage the applicant to include stats and data to put context around the diversity of their board and who is at the table having these conversations with them. I also was disappointed to see that there were no DEI initiatives or focus in the strategic plan, and I would encourage the organization to consider what do those efforts mean in the larger, broader sense of the work that they're trying to do over the next several years. And I did appreciate the focus on decreasing their reliance on the general fund. For community engagement, I wanted to call out that I felt at times they were tentative about talking about race, but it felt like they wanted to talk about it. So just lean in, have a conversation. It is okay. It's better than tiptoeing around it by talking about kind of odd diversity, ethnicity percentages that don't really relate or tell the story of the work that you're doing. Lean in. If you're doing the work, own it and be proud of it. And if you're missing a mark somewhere, be honest and talk about how you're going to fix it. I also wanted to highlight that I appreciated that they were working with aging population, but I also wanted to see how that's reflected in the advisory groups that they work with to create the programming. Are there voices from that community? Are they working with caregivers? And that just didn't come through. And it also had that same feeling with their discussion around activation of young families. Simply asking them what movies they want to watch felt distant and passive. How are you considering the way programs are developed or spaces are set up to be inviting and welcoming to a young family? And how are you defining young family? A side note, so you may want to, just grantsmanship, always proof your application really closely because I think there was something amiss in your response about talking about the family restroom that you installed to assist with those with mobility something. So I didn't know if that was challenges, if it was strollers, it was, you talk a little bit about it, but just make sure that there's clarity throughout that response. And, and on their website, they had their annual report and I couldn't help myself, very curious, so I clicked on it and I was just struck by the interesting choice that the annual report is nothing really more than a huge laundry list of everybody that's donated to the organization. Didn't give any information about their programming. Gave very minimal information. It was like 2 paragraphs about the successes that they had that year and absolutely nothing about the impact of the work that they're doing. So think about how that annual report can act as another piece of collateral that your organization can use to tell the story of what you're doing and where you're going and where you fit in the community.
One other thing, Karen, I may have missed it. I didn't see any delineation or description of the qualifications of the staff. I kept looking for an artistic director and what that artistic director's background had been. In my search for curatorial leader, I didn't find it.
Yeah, it's a very large staff. There, I would agree. I didn't see a lot of information.
Yeah, I didn't see qualifications at all.
Okay, anybody else have anything new, different, opposing? Then let's update those scores for the last time. And this concludes the fiscal year 2020-2021 Arts Organizational Support 3 Advisory Panel. And I want to thank you all very, very much. Don't trip.